There is a piece of Lagos that did not exist 20 years ago. It rose out of the Atlantic Ocean, one truckload of sand at a time. Today, it has its own roads, its own power grid, its own security, and its own rules for doing business. Officially, it is called Eko Atlantic City. Unofficially, some people call it a city within a city. And the question worth asking is simple. What happens when a private company builds infrastructure that used to be the job of government? To understand Eko Atlantic, you have to go back to a beach. Bar Beach, on Victoria Island, used to be the most famous stretch of sand in Nigeria. Families gathered there on weekends. During the military era, it had a darker history too, once used as a public execution ground for convicted armed robbers, with crowds gathering to watch. But by the 2000s, the beach's biggest threat was not politics. It was the ocean itself, eating the coastline alive at a rate of around 30 meters a year. In 2005, Lagos State Governor Bola Tinubu wrote to the federal government asking for approval to fix it permanently. His letter was titled, plainly, A Permanent Solution to Bar Beach. The proposed fix was not a seawall alone. It was an entirely new city, built on reclaimed land, funded almost entirely by private money. The company chosen to do it was South Energix Nigeria Limited, a subsidiary of the Shaguri Group, a Nigerian conglomerate with deep roots in construction, oil services, and real estate. This is where the story gets interesting. Reclaimed land means ground that did not exist before, created by pumping sand from the ocean floor and packing it into a new shape. Eko Atlantic used more than 75 million cubic meters of sand to build roughly 10 million square meters of new land, an area close to the size of Manhattan's skyscraper district. Protecting all of it is a seawall known as the Great Wall of Lagos, stretching about 8.5 kilometers, engineered with help from the Dutch firm Royal Haskoning and tested against storms rated to occur once every 1,000 years. Here is where the government steps back and the private sector steps forward. Eko Atlantic operates as a public-private partnership, meaning private investors put up the capital and take on the financial risk, while the Lagos state government acts as a strategic partner rather than the primary funder. The physical construction itself was handled by China Communications Construction Company, one of the largest marine dredging and infrastructure builders in the world, brought in to pump sand and shape the new coastline. In practice, the partnership means South Energix builds and owns the roads inside Eko Atlantic. It runs its own power supply instead of relying on Nigeria's notoriously unreliable national grid, where blackouts are common enough that most businesses budget for diesel generators as a basic cost of operating. It manages its own water, its own security, and its own drainage. Why does that matter? Because in most of Lagos, those basic services are unreliable, expensive, or simply absent. Inside Eko Atlantic, they are marketed as guaranteed, sold to investors as a reason the premium price is worth paying. That guarantee comes at a price. Land in Eko Atlantic sells for over $1,000 per square meter, with some plots trading even higher. Compare that to the average cost of land elsewhere in Lagos, and the gap is enormous. So who is actually buying in? Major Nigerian banks, including First Bank, Access Bank, Guarantee Trust Bank, and FCMB, have all financed developments or taken up space there. International tenants have followed. The United States government is building its new consulate general on a 12-acre site inside Eko Atlantic, expected to become the largest American consulate in the world when it opens. When a superpower chooses to build its diplomatic outpost inside a privately built city, that tells you something about how seriously investors are taking this project. But is calling it a sovereign state going too far? Not quite. Eko Atlantic is not a separate country. It still sits under Nigerian and Lagos state law. What it does have is something closer to special economic status. Parts of it operate as a free zone, a designated area where businesses get incentives like reduced tax obligations and easier rules for moving profits out of the country, designed to attract foreign investment. That combination, private infrastructure plus favorable business terms, is what makes people describe it as a corporate city, even if the legal label is less dramatic than the nickname suggests. Not everyone sees this as progress. Environmental researchers have linked construction and sand dredging around Eko Atlantic to increased flooding in nearby communities like Kuramo Beach and parts of Victoria Island that were never protected by the new seawall. In August 2012, a storm surge swept through the area, killing several people and displacing residents, and some local groups blame the sand-filling work for worsening the impact. Critics argue that resources and protection are flowing toward a project built mainly for the wealthy, while working-class neighborhoods just outside its walls remain exposed to the very erosion Eko Atlantic was designed to solve. It is a familiar tension in fast-growing African cities. Development attracts capital, but capital does not always distribute its benefits evenly. Still, the project keeps moving. As of the past few years, roughly 2/3 of the planned land has been reclaimed, with residential towers like Eco Pearl already occupied and more phases under construction. The city hosts concerts, marathons, and international sporting events, activity that would have been unthinkable on an unstable, eroding beach 2 decades ago. Lagos itself is projected to cross 30 million residents by 2030, and the pressure for new commercial and residential space is only going to grow. Whether Eko Atlantic becomes a genuine extension of Lagos or an exclusive enclave increasingly separated from it may depend on decisions still being made today. So why should any of this matter to you, even if you have never set foot in Lagos? Because Eko Atlantic is a preview of a bigger trend playing out across the continent. When governments cannot fund infrastructure fast enough, private companies are stepping in to build roads, power, and water systems themselves, then charging a premium for the privilege of using them. That model is spreading from new tech hubs in Kenya to planned cities in Egypt and Ghana. Each one makes the same pitch: pay more and skip the dysfunction everyone else has to live with. For the banks financing towers there, for the diplomats building consulates there, and for the wealthy families buying plots there, Eko Atlantic already looks like the future of urban Africa. For the fishing communities who lost their beach, and for the residents just beyond the wall who still flood when the tide turns, it looks like something else entirely. A reminder that, in this economy, protection is a service you buy, not a right you are guaranteed. The question is not whether private capital can build a city. Eko Atlantic proves it can. The real question is who that city ends up serving, and what happens to the people standing just outside its walls. There is a piece of Lagos that did not exist 20 years ago. Now the question is whether it was ever really built for Lagos at all. If you like this story and want to know more about the companies, entrepreneurs, industries, scandals, and business empires shaping the African continent, hit like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.